I saw, but I said nothing. The pain of loving someone who deceives you. Have you ever imagined finding out that the person you love most has betrayed you in a brutal way, but not having the strength to react? In this realistic and impactful story, discover the emotional behind the scenes of a devastating betrayal, where every silence carries unbearable pain and every choice seems like a trap with no way out. A raw, profound, and intense account of how love can blind and how the truth, when finally revealed, can set you free, but also leave scars that never go away. Like the video to support the channel and subscribe now for more exciting and real stories that will touch your heart. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next episodes of pain, overcoming, and real life. I always knew there was something strange about the way she smiled at him. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible detail, a sparkle in her eyes that only appeared when his name was mentioned. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that jealousy didn't fit in with our relationship. But deep down, there was an uneasiness that grew slowly, like a hidden crack in a concrete wall. Every day it grew bigger until the day everything came crashing down. That night we came home early from a mutual friend's birthday party. I was tired, and she seemed distant. When we got home, she went straight to the bathroom and I, without thinking, sat on the couch and took a deep breath, trying to ignore the strange feeling that was taking over me. It was then that I noticed something. Her cell phone, lying on the table, flickered discreetly. It was a message notification. The screen lit up the room for a second, and I accidentally saw the name. It was him. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I forced myself not to touch the device. I didn't want to be intrusive. I didn't want to be the kind of man who went through his partner's phone. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Those who seek, find. I wasn't ready to find it. And yet, the name remained etched in my memory like a knife. In the following days, everything seemed the same, but I was no longer the same. Every gesture of hers, every smile, every time she left for work put me on alert. I began to notice her delays, her long showers, the new perfume she said she had gotten from a friend. I really wanted to believe that was all it was. But doubt ate away at my chest like rust. One night she left for a work meeting. She said she would be quick, that she wouldn't take long. I stayed home, pacing until something inside me snapped. I got in my car and drove to the restaurant where she usually met with co-workers. I parked a block away, turned off my headlights, and waited. The hours passed like a slow nightmare until around 10 o'clock I saw her. She came out the back door laughing, and he was there, standing next to her, his hand on her back, as if he owned something that didn't belong to him. My heart raced. I huddled in the seat, hoping they wouldn't see me. They stopped on the sidewalk, and she looked at him as if the whole world had disappeared. I watched as he grabbed her by the chin and kissed her. A long, intense kiss, the kind that doesn't happen by chance. I should have gotten out of the car. I should have screamed. I should have done something. But I just stood there, frozen, watching the scene as if I were a stranger in my own life. When she came home, she acted like nothing had happened. She sat down next to me on the couch and asked how my day was, and I smiled. I smiled and said everything was fine, that I had just stayed home and watched a movie. And it was at that moment that I realized that, in some twisted way, I didn't want to lose her. I preferred to pretend I didn't know. I preferred to live in illusion, because the truth was a weight I wasn't ready to carry. But the weight only grew. The next day I saw her texting him again, hiding in the corner of the room. And I just watched. I saw, but I didn't say anything, because part of me believed that she would come back to me, that it was just a passing mistake. But deep down, I knew. And the worst part was that every day I loved her more, or at least I thought I did. Time passed, and the secret became a knife hanging over my head, ready to fall. Until one night, something happened. I arrived home early from work. The door was ajar, and inside the silence was heavy. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart beating like a drum, and that's when I heard it. The voices, hers and his. The voices were muffled, but unmistakable. The sound of laughter, whispers, and the low tones of intimate conversations echoed in the hallway. My chest tightened, the air felt thick, hard to breathe. Each step I took toward the room made my vision darken at the edges, as if my entire body wanted to protect me from what was about to happen, but I couldn't stop. I kept going, even though my hands were shaking, even though my legs felt heavy as lead. When I reached the door, it was ajar, not quite closed. A gentle push was enough to reveal what I already knew, but which still hurt like a sharp blade. I placed my hand on the cold wood, took a deep breath, and pushed. The scene before me unfolded in slow motion. She was lying on the bed, her hair spread out over the pillow, her blouse unbuttoned, her neck marked by kisses. And he was there, so at ease, as if that space were his too. Time seemed to freeze. She turned her head, and when she saw me standing in the doorway, the smile she had for him disappeared. Her expression was one of pure terror, as if she had been caught in the middle of a crime. But it was more than that. It was the look of someone who knew they had just destroyed something precious. He stood up, disoriented, trying to close his shirt while mumbling something I didn't understand. I didn't hear anything. The sound of my own blood rushing through my veins was deafening. I took a step back, then another. My throat burned, tears welling up in my eyes, but I swallowed them back. I didn't shed a single tear then. Not then. She tried to come closer, calling my name as if that could undo what I had just seen. I held up my hand, telling her to stop. She did. He tried to say something, but I glared at him so hard he backed away like a rat. I turned and left, stumbling down the stairs, nearly falling, my hands gripping the banister as if it were the only thing holding me up. When I reached the street, the cold night air hit my face like a slap. I leaned against the wall, feeling my stomach churn, the bitter taste of betrayal burning on my tongue. My whole body was shaking, but my mind was blank, as if it had been turned off. I stood there, still, for an incalculable amount of time, listening to the distant sound of cars passing by, dogs barking, life going on as if my world hadn't just fallen apart. I thought about calling someone, but who? Who could I call to say, I saw her with another man in my bed? I swallowed my tears once more, took a deep breath, and walked aimlessly. My feet took me to the square where we used to walk together. I sat on the bench in front of the fountain, the same one where she had once hugged me and promised eternal love. I looked at the gushing water and felt an insane urge to submerge my head in it, as if I could drown what I had just witnessed. Hours later, I returned home. The lights were off. I walked upstairs slowly, listening to the sounds of the house as if they were from another planet. In the bedroom, she was sitting up in bed, her eyes swollen from crying. When I walked in, she opened her mouth to speak, but I held my hand up again. I didn't want to hear it. Not right now. I went to the closet, grabbed a suitcase and started throwing my things in. With each shirt I put on, the pain became more real, more concrete. She stood up, desperate, telling me it wasn't what I thought, that it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her it meant everything, but I didn't say anything. I kept packing, each piece of clothing like a piece of my heart being ripped out. When the suitcase was full, I closed it tightly, as if that were the end. But it wasn't, because the pain that was just beginning. She held me by the arm, begging me to stay, telling me that she loved me, that it was me she wanted. I looked at her, at the eyes that had looked at me so often with love, and I wondered, how? How could she? And yet, something in me wanted to believe. I let go of her arm, walked out the door, and left her there in the hallway, kneeling, crying. I thought it was the end, but deep down, I knew. This was just the beginning. The next few days were silent torture. I left the house that night, but I didn't manage to go very far. I ended up staying in a cheap hotel, in a bed that smelled of disinfectant and sadness, staring at the ceiling as if all the scenes of my life with her were projected there. The smiles, the hugs, the plans for the future that now seemed like cruel jokes. I spent hours going through my memories, trying to find the exact moment when she stopped being mine, trying to understand if it was my fault for having trusted too much, or hers for having lied so well. On the third day, my phone buzzed. Messages from her, dozens, maybe more. I didn't open any of them, but each notification was like a nail being hammered into my head. The words I imagined she had written burned more than if I had actually read them. Maybe it was better this way, not knowing exactly what she was saying, just knowing that she wanted to talk, and that I wasn't ready to hear it. On the fourth day, my father called me. He said that my mother was worried, that I needed to come home, or at least give her a sign of life. I took a deep breath, held back the tears that threatened to fall, and simply replied with, "I'm fine, Dad." But I wasn't. I wasn't even close to being fine. That night I decided to go home. Not because I wanted to forgive her, but because I needed to pick up some things. I needed to close that chapter once and for all. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. The living room light was on, and she was sitting on the couch, hugging a pillow like a lost child. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes red, her skin pale, her hair disheveled. "I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't breathe without you," she said, and her voice was a broken thread, a fragile sound, but still so full of pain that it made my chest ache. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to have the strength to turn away and leave, but I stood there, as if my feet were rooted in the ground. She stood up slowly, walked toward me, and reached out to touch my face. I took a step back, but she insisted. "Please," she whispered, and her voice was so low it was like a thought. I felt the anger bubbling up, mixed with the longing, with the sick love that still remained. "Why?" I asked, and my voice came out low, almost a whisper. "Why? Why did you do this to me?" She cried, sobbing, and said she didn't know, that it was a mistake, that she was confused, that she felt alone, that he made her feel alive. I closed my eyes, taking deep breaths, trying to hold on to some logic in the midst of all that chaos. "I love you," she repeated, as if those words could glue the broken pieces together. But love alone doesn't save anyone. I sat on the couch, her kneeling in front of me, holding my hand like it was the last anchor in the middle of the shipwreck. I looked at her and saw the woman I planned to grow old with. But now, she seemed like a stranger. It was like I was looking at a distorted reflection, a broken version of the person I loved. And it was at that moment, in the midst of that silence, that her phone vibrated. She froze. The device lit up the table, his name shining like an open wound. The sound of the notification sounded like a shot in the dark. I looked at her, and the desperation in her eyes was almost comical, as if she had forgotten that lies cannot wait. "Answer it," I said, my voice cold as a blade. She hesitated, her eyes watering, her hands shaking. I repeated more firmly, "Answer it now." She picked up her phone, her hands nearly dropping the device. The screen was still flashing with his name. She answered, "Hello?" On the other end, his voice was clear. "Baby, are you okay? I can't stop thinking about you." The world collapsed in that second. She didn't know what to say. She stammered. She tried to make up an excuse, but it was too late. I stood up, every muscle in my body tense like a rope about to snap. I looked at her one last time, her eyes pleading, her face wet with tears, her hands shaking. She tried to come closer, but I held up my hand silently and walked away. But I knew that story wasn't over yet, because what I saw, what I heard, was just the beginning. I left my house like a ghost. I walked the streets without knowing where to go. the sharp night wind hitting my face as if it wanted to wake me from a nightmare that seemed to have no end. Every step I took seemed to echo the sound of betrayal, of lies, of pain. I wondered how I had gotten there, how I had let this happen. It was as if the whole world was collapsing silently, and I was alone, buried in the rubble. I walked to the bus stop, sat down on the cold bench, and leaned my head back, looking up at the sky. There were no stars, just heavy clouds and a faint pale moonlight that seemed to mock me. Her phone was still vibrating in my mind, the sound of him saying, "Love," as if it were normal, as if it were his, not mine. I tasted blood in my mouth, not realizing I had bitten my lip until it was raw. The anger, the pain, the humiliation, it was an acidic mix that burned inside me. Hours later, I returned to the hotel, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, remembering every detail of our story. The first time we met, the way she laughed, the way she held my hand. I remembered our first trip, the promises whispered in the dark, the plans we made. And now, all of that was just a shadow, a memory that hurt more than any knife. I wondered, were any of those words real? Or was she already smiling at him as she told me she loved me? The next day, I woke up to my phone vibrating. It was a message from her. "Please come home. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. There was nothing more to say. Or at least that's what I wanted to believe. But the pain wouldn't leave me alone. I knew she was there, alone, probably crying, probably waiting for me to forgive her. And part of me, the weakest part, the most hurt, wanted to go back, wanted to listen, wanted to believe that it had just been a mistake. But I knew it wasn't. I knew. Late that afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and the voice on the other end sent chills down my spine. It was him, the man who had stolen my life, my home, my wife. "We need to talk," he said, and the calm in his voice was like a punch. I didn't answer. I just hung up. But the seed had been planted. He wanted to talk to me. And why? What did he have to say? That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I got in my car and drove to the front of my house. I stood there, parked, watching the lights come on, her figure passing by the window. She seemed restless, pacing back and forth, looking at her phone, crying. I wondered if she was thinking about me or him. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. A new message. It was from him, again. "It's not what you think. She didn't tell you everything. We need to talk. Today, at the bar on the corner, 9 o'clock. I stood there, staring at the screen as if it might explode at any moment. What did he want to tell me? That it wasn't just a one-time thing, that she loved him, that there was a reason, a story behind it all. I knew I shouldn't go. I knew it would only hurt me more. But the curiosity, the anger, the desperation, they pulled at me like invisible hooks. At 9 o'clock, there I was, sitting at a dark table in the corner bar, my heart racing, my palms sweating. I waited, and he appeared, smiling as if this were a game. He sat across from me, ordered a drink, and was silent for a few seconds, as if savoring the tension. Then he spoke, and his words were like sharp knives cutting through the little sanity I had left. He told me everything. How she looked for him, how she said she felt alone, that everything was the same with me, everything was monotonous. He looked me in the eyes and said that she laughed at me behind my back, that she called me her faithful puppy, that what they had was special, that she said that with me it was just appearance, but that her heart was his. I held the glass so tightly I thought it would break. I was shaking. I wanted to hit it, I wanted to scream, I wanted to disappear. But I just stood there, paralyzed, listening to each word as if it were a sentence. When he finished, he stood up, took a sip of his drink and said, "She'll never tell you this, but I thought you should know." And he left. I stood there, alone, my head pounding, my chest empty, the world spinning. I thought about calling her, about going home, about asking her what was true and what was a lie. But deep down I knew. And the worst part, I still loved her. I sat there, motionless, as if time had stopped just for me. The voices around me, the laughter, the clinking of glasses at the bar. Everything seemed distant, muffled, as if I were watching a silent film of my own life. I stared into space, trying to understand at what moment I had lost everything. The image of her in bed, his voice whispering love, her muffled laughter. Everything repeated itself in my mind like torture, a scratched record that never stopped spinning. I stood up slowly as if my body were made of stone. Each step was heavy, each breath hurt as if my lungs were crushed. I left the bar without looking back, without caring about the waiter's pitying look or the hubbub of the tables around me. The street seemed too dark, as if the lights had been turned off to leave me alone with my thoughts. I walked aimlessly, his words echoing in my head like knives. She laughed at you. Faithful puppy, you were never enough. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to vanish. But my feet took me to the front of my house. The living room light was still on, and I could see her silhouette sitting on the couch, curled up, holding her phone like it was a lifeline. She looked small, fragile, as if the weight of guilt had crushed her. I stood across the street in the dark, watching, and for the first time I felt angry at myself. How could I have been so blind, so foolish? I believed every word, every vow of love, and now I was just another chapter in her story. I took a step back, but the phone vibrated in my pocket. It was her. "Where are you? Please come home. I need you." The message glowed on the screen like poison. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. I clutched the phone so tightly I thought I would crush it. I turned my back and walked away without looking back. I got to the car, sat down on the seat and rested my forehead on the steering wheel. The silence was deafening. I wondered how many lies were still hidden, how many truths she had kept to herself. I thought about everything he had said, and the question kept ringing in my head. Did she really love me? Or was I just a safe pastime, a plan B for the boring days? The next day, I woke up with no memory of where I was. The sun was beating down on the windshield and my body ached like I'd been beaten. My phone had 20 more messages from her, all of them begging me to come back, all of them telling me it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that it was me she loved. I wanted to respond, to tell her the pain was unbearable, that she had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. But I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the screen, paralyzed. Late that afternoon, she showed up at the hotel. She knocked on the door like a storm, insistent, until I opened it. When the door opened, she fell into my arms, crying, her words coming out in disordered sobs. She said he was a mistake, that she was confused, that she didn't know what she was doing, that our story was real, that she loved me, that she wanted to be with me, that she was going to change, that she would do anything to make it right. And I, like an idiot, believed it. Or at least a part of me wanted to believe it. Because the pain of losing her seemed greater than the pain of continuing to know about the betrayal. Because the fear of loneliness was a monster that I didn't know how to face. I let her in. She lay on my chest, and we cried together like two shipwrecked people trying to hold on to a piece of driftwood at sea. She said she was going to delete his number, that she never wanted to see him again, that I was the only man she loved. I wanted to believe her. I wanted it so badly. But that night, when she went to the bathroom, her phone was on the bed, and I couldn't resist. I picked up the phone, unlocked it, and there it was. A new message from him, sent just a few minutes earlier, saying, "Is he back yet? Don't worry, it'll pass soon." My world fell apart once again, and I realized that it would never end, because what I felt for her was stronger than my pride, stronger than the pain. I knew I was trapped, and worse, I knew she knew it too. The message on the screen was like a punch in the gut. I stood there, staring at the words, the phone shaking in my hand. "Is he back yet? Don't worry, it'll pass soon." The words flashed before my eyes, each letter a stab that opened a new wound. The silence in the room was overwhelming, and the sound of the shower running seemed distant, as if it were coming from another world, from a reality where everything still made sense. But there, on that bright screen, was where the truth lived, raw, relentless, inevitable. I thought about confronting her right then, screaming, asking her how she had the nerve to lay on my chest and tell me she loved me while still texting him. But I couldn't. My fingers were shaking, and a part of me wanted to delete the message, pretend I'd never seen it. As if that would make the pain go away, as if ignoring it would be enough to save what was left. I dropped the phone on the bed, hands shaking, chest tight, and sat on the floor, leaning my head against the wall, eyes closed, trying not to scream. When she came out of the bathroom, in a towel, her hair dripping wet, she looked at me and smiled. A tired smile, but still sweet, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just destroyed everything again. I watched her in silence, feeling a hatred that mixed with a sick love, with a pain that crushed my chest. She lay down next to me, hugged me, and I let her do it. I allowed it, because deep down I was lost, and she knew it. That night, she fell asleep with her head on my chest, and I lay awake, feeling her weight on me like a stone. The smell of her shampoo, the warmth of her skin, her light breathing. It all felt so familiar, so intimate, but at the same time, so dirty, so wrong. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand where I'd gone wrong, trying to find some sign, some clue that this had been going on for longer than I could imagine. The next day, she woke up smiling, making coffee, trying to act like everything was normal. I watched her silently and realized how good she was at this, at acting, at making it seem like nothing was wrong, at pretending we were happy. And I was the spectator of my own tragedy. When she left for work, I stood there, alone, staring at the closed door, the echo of her footsteps still filling the apartment. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I picked up my phone and typed him a message. Short, simple, to the point. "We need to talk, today, at 7. I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt like I needed to hear it from him again. Not the words, but the tone, the details, everything she didn't say, and that he, in his petty pride, might have blurted out without meaning to. I needed to understand how far that story went. I needed to know how much of my life had been a lie. At 7 o'clock in the evening, there I was, sitting in the same bar, at the same table. He came over with that air of superiority, as if he were doing me a favor, as if he were giving me a gift by sharing his version of events. He ordered a beer, sat down, and started talking. And every word he said was like acid burning my skin. He told me things she had never told him. The times they had gone out during work hours, the places they had met, the excuses she had made. He said it with a smile, as if it were a joke, as if the pain he had caused was a trophy to show off. I gripped the edge of the table tightly, my nails digging into the wood, my heart racing like an out-of-beat drum. At one point he laughed and said, she even said she liked how I made her feel alive, that you were good but predictable, that with you everything was always the same. That's when I broke. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly. The chair tipped over backwards and the entire bar went silent, eyes on us. He laughed as if he'd won. I left, without looking back, my head throbbing, my vision blurry. That night, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly, the road passing quickly before my eyes, the sound of the wind cutting through the night. I screamed, a muffled scream inside the car, an outburst of pain, of humiliation, of a love that now seemed like poison to me. I knew I needed to get out of this, that I needed to put an end to it. But then my phone buzzed. It was her, a single message. "I need to tell you something. It's important. Please meet me tomorrow." And I knew it wasn't over. I spent the night awake, lying in the car seat, staring at the ceiling as if the universe could give me some answer. The early morning cold cut my skin, but nothing was colder than the emptiness inside me. Her message kept hammering in my head. "I need to tell you something. It's important. Please meet me tomorrow." I tried to imagine what it could be. Was she finally going to confess everything, or make up another excuse? I didn't know what to expect anymore, but some part of me, that weak, broken, dependent part, still wanted to hear it. The next day at 7 o'clock in the evening, there I was again, in the same place where it all began, our apartment. I hesitated in front of the door, the key trembling in my hand. The silence of the hallway was suffocating, and the familiar smell of the building brought back a wave of memories that almost knocked me over. I took a deep breath, turned the key, and went inside. She was sitting on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes red, her makeup smeared. The room felt smaller, the air heavy, as if the space itself had absorbed the weight of the lies. I closed the door slowly and stood there, saying nothing. She looked up and tried to smile, but the smile died before it could begin. "I need to talk to you. Please sit down," she said, her voice cracking like a shard of glass being dragged across the floor. I sat down, but kept my distance. It felt like every inch between us was an invisible wall, a barrier she could no longer cross. She took a deep breath, ran her hands over her face as if trying to wash away all the guilt. "I lied to you. I lied a lot. More than you know." Her words hit me like a cold wave. I forced myself to stay calm, to listen, even though each word was a nail being driven into my chest. She continued, and her voice was shaking, but it was firm. It wasn't just him. It wasn't just once. It was months, maybe more. And it wasn't just him. I felt my entire body freeze. Time stood still. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo in the silence of the room. I stared at her, eyes wide, unable to breathe. She continued, the tears now falling uncontrollably. I felt empty, alone, and I sought attention, affection, validation. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to me. I loved you, I love you, but it was like it wasn't enough. I did horrible things. I met other guys. I texted. I lied to you almost every day. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. It was like the ground had disappeared and I was floating in a dark void, with no air, no ground, no nothing. She came closer, kneeling in front of me, her hands reaching for mine. I jerked my body back, backing away from her as if she were fire. The look in her eyes was one of pure desperation, a cornered animal that knew it had lost everything. "I know you hate me. I know I destroyed everything, but I don't want to lose you. I swear I'll do anything to make it right. Please don't leave me." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and the world seemed to spin. Her words echoed in my head, mixed with the memories, the pain, the anger. And yet, deep down, there was a part of me that wanted to believe, that wanted to forgive, that wanted to erase it all and pretend it never happened. But I knew that was impossible. I stood up slowly, as if my body weighed tons. I looked at her, kneeling, broken. And I thought, is this what's left of us? A broken man, a desperate woman, a relationship burned to the ground? I didn't say anything. I gathered my things, each movement painful, each step heavy, and walked to the door. She stood up, ran to me and grabbed my arm tightly. "Please don't leave. Give me one more chance, just one more." I stopped. The silence between us was deafening. I could hear my own breathing, my heart beating wildly, and then the doorbell rang. We both froze. She looked at the door, her face instantly turning pale. I frowned, feeling the blood run cold in my veins. "Who is it?" I asked, but she didn't answer. She stood there, her eyes wide, her body tense. The bell rang again, insistent, like a drumbeat announcing the end. I looked at her. "Who is it?" I repeated, my voice low, almost a whisper, but charged with electric tension. She didn't answer, but her look said it all. And it was at that moment that I understood. The worst was yet to come. The sound of the doorbell seemed louder now, as if each ring were a nail hammering into the coffin of our story. I stood still, my heart pounding so hard it hurt, the air heavy as if the entire room were closing in on me. She, pale as a ghost, couldn't move. Her eyes, wide, glued to the door, told me more than any words could. I knew in that moment that on the other side of that door was the truth she'd never had the courage to tell. I didn't think. I took a step forward, my hand trembling on the doorknob. She cried out, "No!" and ran toward me, trying to hold me back, clutching my arm desperately. But I pushed her aside with a strength I didn't know I had. The doorknob turned, the door creaked open slowly, and there he was. He was standing in the hallway, his face half surprised, half cynical, as if he had been caught in the middle of a game he thought he had under control. He was holding a bag, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, and when he saw my face, his expression changed from a smile to a slight recoil, as if he finally understood that this was not just a game. For a second, everything was silent. Me, him, her behind me. The perfect triangle of a tragedy that had dragged on for too long. She tried to speak, but her voice came out broken, choked. "It's not what you think." But it was exactly what I thought. And worse, because now there were no more excuses, no more lies to be made up. It was all there before my eyes, raw, dirty, real. I took a step forward and he held up his hands as if to avoid a fight. "Calm down, man. We need to talk." His voice was too calm, as if he were the one in the right, as if he were offering me something of value. I wanted to punch him, I wanted to knock him down right there, but something inside me held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the brutal realization that no amount of physical fighting could fix what was broken. She started crying, mumbling incoherent words, trying to explain herself, but I couldn't hear anything. The sound of her voice was a distant hum, and the only thing I could think was, how did I get here? How did everything turn into this? I looked at him and said, in a low voice, full of everything I felt, "You won. Congratulations." He opened his mouth to answer, but I had already turned away. I grabbed my backpack from the floor, the only thing I could gather before everything fell apart. When I walked through the door, she tried to stop me, holding my arm, crying like a child, telling me that she loved me, that it was me she wanted. I looked at her red eyes, at her face smeared with makeup and pain, and I felt an emptiness so great it almost drowned me. "I loved you too," I said, and each word came out like a knife being pulled from my chest. But love alone cannot sustain a lifetime of lies. I let her go. I walked to the elevator, my footsteps echoing down the hallway like a death knell. As the door closed, I saw her face one last time. The despair, the regret, the pain. And I knew in that moment that she knew it too. The end had come. I walked out of the building, the night wind in my face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally knew I didn't have to fight anymore. I was free. Broken, yes, but free. And as I walked aimlessly through the empty streets, I realized that the worst betrayal wasn't hers. It was mine. I betrayed myself every time I saw and said nothing. Every time I closed my eyes to the truth, every time I accepted less than I deserved. I swore, right there under the cold city lights, that I would never let that happen again. Never again would I let someone destroy me inside while I pretended everything was okay. I saw it. I knew it. I felt it. But now it was time to move on. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Share if you've ever experienced something like this, or if you know someone who has. Like the video to support the channel, and subscribe now for more moving and real stories that will touch your heart. End.